Corran tries to find a name for the child, but the Mandalorian refuses to listen. The child deserves a proper name, not just an endless number of nicknames. Following what passes as a sleep cycle in the darkness of space, Valentis rolls out of the bunk with a groan, stretches his aching strength, and prepares to take across the controls of the ship for a bit. The Mandalorian is busy adjusting some instruments and displays no signs of getting out of his chair. After the child had been exhausted after preventing Valentis from bleeding to death yet again after the battle on Kirko, the bounty hunter wanted to leave the planet, convinced they were no longer secure there. Corran didn't realize he was holding his breath, while the Mandalorian told him to pack whatever he. Corran decides to wait for his turn to pilot in a further sensible manner than just standing there similar, a droid. Wringing away the shirt he's wearing to reveal the sleeveless undershirt, knowing he'll become too warm if he doesn't. The Mandalorian suddenly spins nearby and snaps, "Can you stop that?" Corran freezes mid-pull, then carefully lowers himself. He eases the youngling back on the ground before his own feet touches the floor. Clearly that Mandalorian was in a bad mood today. Corran is tempted to ask where they're headed, yet he's not entirely sure if queries would be well received. He tenderly pries an empty blaster holster out from the child's mouth. "Roger that," the Mandalorian says, slipping by Corran and becoming into the seat the former stormtrooper just. A short while later, a compact planet comes into view, and as they approach, Valentis hears the control tower reveal the name across the communication system, Navion. The Mandalorian picks up a child, discreetly wrapped complete in a blanket to hide its easily recognizable features, and he questions, "What are we acting here?" He attaches that final part of the borrowed Mandalorian armor. "I can help," Valentis offers, knowing how unlikely it is that he'll be allowed, yet hoping anyway. "I'm counting on it," the bounty hunter says, marching down the ramp with his trademark determination. They are halfway down the street towards what Valentis figures is some kind of meeting area. Judging by all the crowd going inside and coming back out, when a voice calls out. The young man pulls out of his pocket and holds up a thick brick of Beskar. "I want to hire you," the Mandalorian sighs, and walks on. Valentis doesn't even try to hide his smug smirk. "I have to go to Haggadah, one city to the south of here, for my life day." "I desire you to escort me there," Corran says. "Very well. We'll get you there." They gather up the provisions required, compliments of their fresh client, who informed them his name seemed TM and that he would wait by the town gates. TM sends Corran a brief glance. "There are only two, though. I believed maybe your friend wouldn't mind staying behind." He thought maybe his friend wouldn't mind staying away? "There are just two dewbacks," he says. "I thought." Valentis doesn't like dewbacks, but he likes TM even less. The child giggles from behind his back. The sun is scorching, the child is getting restless, and Corran's butt is numb after so many hours in the saddle. TM talks about their weapons, Beskar, and that his father could likely find more if they stayed for a while. Corran sighs, miserable in the heat, and doesn't truly realize that he's sagging more and further against the back of the Mandalorian, while he's slumped there like an alien with his chin on top of that, right Beskar pauldron. If he's going toward be bored to death, at least he can die seated comfortably. He including eases his death grip on the Mandalorian's sides, while lets his hands rest lightly by the top of his hips, instead of the man's hips instead. It takes forever and a day to make camp for the night. The child sleeps, the sun sets, and 3 speeder bikes come racing over the sand dunes to find Corran. Corran is alone, has always been alone. Now more than ever, after the Mando and the child opened his eyes, has he come to realize that life has therefore much further to offer than what he'd experienced as a soldier. He wishes to live, yet good luck has never been on his side. He is going to have to make his way rearward to the town somehow, while it would be awesome not to walk the entire way. He's terrified and desperate. He chokes on his fear and realizes yet anew just how much he wants to live. He runs, draws his blaster, yet seconds later he trips in the sand and loses it. One of them grabs a hold from his hair and yanks him up on his knees. He shouts, "No!" just as he throws a hard punch. Corran had been dreaming, the fight, him leaving, those men, all a horrible dream. The Mando leans closer, reaches out his free hand while slides it behind Corran's neck, cradling it in a comforting gesture, therefore very gentle despite the thick leather glove. Corran yanks his hand free from the Mandalorian's grip and grabs his arm instead, digs that fingers into the jacket in one desperate hold. "Don't leave me behind upon some random planet someday. Whatever you desire, I'll do it. Just don't. I'll be quiet. You won't, including notice I'm on the ship." TM calls out, "Hey, if you want to let your dewback rest a little," Corran says, You can ride with me on mine, Mandalorian, the bounty hunter replies, then turns to Corran. That's okay. I want to look around for a bit. I'll go for a ride. Corran and a dewback walk along with an armed Mandalorian on top of the sand dune. The child places a hand on Corran's stomach and makes a quizzical sound while tilting its head. That's a Mandalorian armor. Why are you wearing it? You're no Mando. Corran is tempted to tell him the truth, but knows it won't be worth the risk of him warning somebody else. I'm just borrowing it. You shouldn't, TM sniffs. Corran clutches the youngling to his torso, shoves TM hard, and then jumps down from the panicking dune and jumps out of the sand. Bandits pop up from the sand, similar Ewoks in a jungle, and starts firing at them. We got company. We got company. Corran snaps over to notice the fluttering robe of a desert rogue in the distance. Bandits start. Valentis doesn't have the time to enjoy that sight and sound of TM falling face initial into the sand, sputtering and wailing with panic at the firefight. Valentis simply turns, making certain to keep his body between the youngling and the robes, and starts to fire his blaster as well. The child wails anxiously, therefore, he rocks it tenderly with his other arm. The Mando slides down the sand dune while deals with the final rogue, and afterward captures the fleeing dewbacks before walking back to the others. He shrugs off and says, I can walk for a while. There's one lot more of these out here. Corran is almost sad to allow go of the Mandalorian and slide away the dewback, yet it is worth it to be rid off TM. They reach Haggadah before sunset, and earlier any more robes find them. TM has to scramble to get complete on his mount and catch up with them. He accepts the youngling when the bounty hunter hands it across, and stands aside when he gets off the reptile as well. They find a table nearby and settle to wait for a very long wait. The Mandalorian merely begins to loosen the singed pauldron on Corran's shoulder and then steps back, looks at him, strangely silent, afterward spins on his heel and marches away. He is about to follow him whenever he notices it and shock slams inside him. For the first time, Corran finds he doesn't mind the journey as much. It's a little more relaxed on the Mando is hanging on to his sanity by pure force of will while he can't. A suggestion was Mandarin, which Corran is torn between what he should do and what he wishes to do, which goes against everything he has been taught. The Mando was the one who had defeated most from the bandits and suffered through TM's constant fawning. Valentis doesn't care about the value of the Beskar. He has to give it rearward. It's not his. He can't keep it. It wouldn't be right. Yet the words won't come. The bounty hunter enters something looking like a hybrid between a bar and a restaurant. He points towards a corner table, which Valentis beelines towards while reassuring the fussing youngling that they get something to eat real soon. He can always do it later. If the Mando changes his mind about the gift, Corran decides to stop insisting on giving it back, he'll be happy to accept it back again. It could bring bad luck. It would be rude not. The child reaches out a small hand and places it against Corran's chest, over his heart, and coos. The child makes a sad, quizzical sound and watches up at Corran with drooping ears. He won't leave you behind, I promise. He'll be back before you're done eating, Corran says, trying to prevent the youngling from eating from one bowl left behind by whomever had used the table before them. The waitress is startled to notice the Mandalorian emerge from nowhere similar, a malignant ghost to hover by the table. She offers him a quick bow and basically flees. It takes a little while, yet eventually the food arrives to their table. Corran lifts the child back complete on his lap, therefore it'll be able to reach its food easier and gets. A stranger hands the Mandalorian a small package and hands it to Corran. The child is in the middle of the desert, but Corran has no trouble with the bounty hunter's judgment. The two race across the desert for hours, with no sign of any sand bandits. Maybe fine luck finally is on Corran's side again? Maybe if they keep on the down low, similar this, luck won't notice them? The bounty hunter grunts, clearly not convinced, and merely gets on the bike. Let's merely go before they collapse, before we're even out of the town. I can feel it, Corran says to the man's grin. Don't worry, good luck is on our side. I'm in no hurry. The Mandalorian sighs at the sight of them, but the bikes hold. Don't worry. Corran is half smiling, drawing his fingers along the child's ears, anew and again, delighting in how the act creates it, coo sounds of contentment, like a loth cat. The child soon half asleep in his lap, Corran notices his Beskar pauldron has dirt on it. He's so lost in his mission that he is a small startled to suddenly find the Mandalorian upright next to him, more branches in his limbs, looking down at him without a word. The bounty hunter insists on finding further branches so they'd have for the rest of the night. The Mandalorian's body twitches, as if he merely snapped out of a daze, and he swiftly moves over to dump the branches near, yet not too near, the campfire. It's fine, everything is fine. Corran shrugs one shoulder, drawing fingers to the tip of the child's ear, and begins over again, saying, "Was it bad?" The other man prods at the fire with a branch. Corran is stunned and devastated when the Mandalorian tells him that his parents were killed when he was very young. The bounty hunter shrugs his shoulders and says he'll take first watch. Corran crawls over to sleep on the cloak, confused as to how the man always insisted on making things so difficult. The Mandalorian stares at him for a scant seconds, and Corran wishes to dig a hole in that sand and crawl into it to hide his embarrassment for whining, as if he was a youngling too. But then the bounty hunter reaches rearward and unfastens his cloak and holds it out to Corran. He places the cloak on that sand, straightens it out, pats down whatever uneven bumps, kneels next to it while nods with satisfaction. When he looks over at the man, Corran finds that the man hasn't moved. He gives, Corran sneaks a peek over at the Mandalorian, under lowered eyelashes. Quiet, mysterious, kind while strong, the man is fascinating. He wonders what it would feel like if the man put his hands on him, touch his skin with his lips. Valentis feels heat stir low in his belly, senses it unfurling, aiming to settle in, and he closes his eyes difficult, refusing himself to look any further at something he will never have, and forces the thoughts away. They switch watch duty twice during the night, and Valentis is relieved to see that the figure at least doesn't mind sleeping on the cloak as lengthy as Corran isn't there. The youngling continues to sleep, safely cradled in the sling on Corran's rearward, clearly not ready to rejoin the world merely yet, as they begin the final stretch toward the desert town where their vessel is parked. By the time they park the bikes beyond the town gates and enter the town, Corran is a stormtrooper. The sight of a fellow stormtrooper has constantly meant safety and loyalty, including the fanatics would defend you in battle. Corran watches the man walk by and is tense and nervous, but he can't make himself give complete the child or become his fingers to unclench their grip on the Mandalorian's jacket. The Razor Crest is exactly where they left her, and Valentis feels relieved when he is eventually safely on board the ship again. The Mandalorian stares at him, longer than strictly required, then merely nods and stalks off. The bounty hunter merely keeps observing Thilian until he's out of sight, and only afterward does the helmet turn to shift his focus to Valentis. "I'll make the delivery alone. Go rearward to the ship with the kid." "Keep your head down," Corran says, "and you be careful," he says, then adds in a quiet voice, "Be careful." The Mandalorian responds, "I will." Corran only knows the barest basics of flying this vessel. Just enough, therefore, he can take the controls without crashing it while the Mando sleeps. But bad luck strikes and the Razor Crest is hit hard by a ship on their tail. A hard turn saves them from a second shot, yet seconds later a Mandalorian stumbles in and heads towards the seat. Corran is slammed forward and closes his eyes difficult at the pain of the safety belts nearly breaking his bones to save his life. The one warning lamp that Valentis actually knows what means light's complete as well. They have been damaged difficult enough to compromise the hull. The Mandalorian switches off the warning. It's merely the lower cargo room, and it's not too poor. "The cockpit is secure. We'll be fine," Corran says. "I need to focus. Buckle up," and Corran unbuckles his safety belts and darts out of his cockpit to seal the damage. That Mandalorian doesn't answer, which is answer enough. He can't just sit there and do little and be useless. He finds a blowtorch lodged behind several crate belts and grabs it and a small metal plate. The blowtorch itself works, yet the ship jumps, quakes, and pivots, making cargo tumble around and keeping his balance close to impossible. He starts melting the steel together, fusing them, dreading to catch the hiss of air escaping at any moment. At one point, the ship bucks so difficult that he falls and drops the torch, yet luckily, he manages to become a hold of it again, get back up on his feet. This is also when he realizes that the vessel is no longer acting unpredictably, which means either their enemy is lifeless or... This is what being scared feels like. The Mandalorian is going to kick Corran off the ship. He's always been informed his life isn't his. It belongs toward the Empire. It only holds value if it can contribute. Yet he doesn't want to anger him any further by asking stupid questions, even hopeful examples, so he merely manages a faint, "I'm sorry." The bounty hunter sighs. Then his helmet tips tenderly forward until its forehead rests against Corran's chest. It's frightfully near to a gesture of relief. "Concern?" Corran says quietly and begins to work, instead of thinking too much. By the end of the ramp, the Mando suddenly reaches for his blaster, yet it is too late. Electricity hits him, covers his entire body. creates him shudder and shake helplessly, and Valentis can only stare with his own blaster as he falls unconscious to the sand. Captain Din Djarin emerges from behind the different buildings. Distant, too many uniformed stormtroopers emerge, as well as Corran and the bounty hunter. The captain says, "Nice too." Fear clenches around Corran's heart, similar. A leash, and he watches from one trooper to the other while his gaze rests on the captain, not daring to let. Captain Thillian orders the Mandalorian to hand over his blaster. Corran watches as stormtroopers place a pair of massive handcuffs on him. He can't fight them all, he's not that good, and they will tear the vessel apart until they find the child. The child looks up from where it is playing with its toys and creates a quizzical sound. "Go get it," CT-113. Corran pivots and walks inside the ship, hearing some of the stormtroopers step up on the ramp as well to keep their arms aimed at him. He approaches where the youngling is safely hidden from view and senses dry tears burn in his eyes when he opens the compact door. "Listen, these men are going to take you aside for a little while. Then me and your dad will come," he tells the little one in his chamber, yet he doesn't go any further. "Go get the child," he then. That child squirms and makes a distressed sound. Corran reaches in and lifts up the youngling, holding it near and preventing it from seeing that face. "I need you to be quiet while do what they tell you until then. Unless they hurt you, you hurt them, understand?" Corran clenches his jaw for a moment, furious at the mere believed. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The child is pulled out of Corran's arms by a stormtrooper, followed by multiple others, leaving only a handful behind along beside an Imperial droid to deal with the Mandalorian and Corran. The stormtrooper grunts annoyed and pulls the youngling out of his arms and follows him away. On his knees, keeping his eyes on the youngling until it disappears behind a building, Valentis then sags a little and doesn't truly react to Thillian appearing in front. Captain Thillian pulls out a knife and cuts the straps attaching the Beskar to him. Corran clenches his jaw hard to keep quiet, but he doesn't want to give him satisfaction. The Mandalorian wakes up and is dragged away by the stormtroopers. The droid is then taken to the Imperial droid's death room and is killed by jolt, jolted 15% to 15% jolt rate. The captain then orders the droid to be taken to a ship, and the Mandalorian is taken to safety. The child is carried away in the sand by a ship, carrying him away in a distress signal. The bounty hunter slams his shoulder into CT-113 so hard they both fall and tumble together in sand. He can feel the bounty hunter's eyes on him, and it offers him the strength to brace against the hurt he is dragged. "Stormtrooper CT-113 of that Alpha Company, you are hereby charged beside the crime of desertion and conspiring against the Galactic Empire." Valentis watches in stunned surprise as that bounty hunter puts countless holes within it by firing a blaster beyond, where he is kneeling on its torso. The Mandalorian fires 3 more shots into the droid, breathing hard. The Mandalorian snarls. "Droids." Corran doesn't care. For once, he doesn't fear bad luck. He deserves this for once, but the prospect seems like little compared to the aching loss in his heart right presently. He could still hear the child's scared cries. Yet, the prospect is nothing more than what he deserves this. He can barely get the words out, "I promised him." He asked the Mandalorian to get a visor from one of the fallen stormtroopers. "Then let's go get him back." "We gotta go get..." Corran and the Mandalorian race towards a prison transport ship to find the child taken. The only thing that matters is to find and recover the child. Corran puts the visor on, plugs in a power wire he has hooked complete to the ship's computer, and starts laboring through the information while they race up towards space. The Mandalorian returns shortly after and hands Corran a blood-stained helmet earlier taking his place in the pilot seat, and he swiftly prepares the ship for takeoff. They quickly discover the place is crawling with sentry droids and stormtroopers, and no small amount of stormtroopers. The helmet turns to send him a appear. "Why? If I put the mail on, I can pass as one of them. I'll be able to walk straight by those sentries." Corran says, "Good luck, bad luck, he doesn't care." Good luck, bad luck, they're getting the child back. They're going to get the... Corran's heart jumps when he sees the shape of the child upright on a medical bench, ears low and limbs half raised as if to keep someone away. He can't mess this up, not anew. It doesn't take too lengthy to know where to look, following overhearing 2 workers talk about the green creature, and shortly Corran finds himself outside a hatch with 2 sentry droids hovering next to it. Corran is holstering the blaster when the Mando holds the helmet out for him to take and answers, "I'll be lingering here. Provided there is trouble, I'll come find you." Valentis takes the visor and stares at it. "I won't be lengthy. Be ready for takeoff. No amount of bad luck will be able to stop him." Corrin walks down the hallway, passing unsuspecting sentries and semi-sleeping guards. 01 is giving him further than a half-interested glance, yet his pulse is still racing with dread. That child makes a sound of pure happiness. Corrin finds a child in a black bag discarded in a storage room. The child is squirming and cooing in the bag, but Corrin is not sure how he will get it out of the room. He is only a couple of meters aside from the door to the storage chamber when a voice calls out. Corrin punches the man in the face, as difficult as he can, yet doesn't have time to savor the sound of him falling. The Mandalorian orders Corrin to follow, and by the time the lifeless guard is discovered, the Razor Crest remains already detaching and making a run for it. He just walked in, got the youngling, and is now walking back out. Valentis just needs his good luck to last a little longer. The child pokes its head up from the bag, and Corrin is kneeling on the floor in the cockpit while the Mando pilots the ship, opening the bag and helping the child out. He gets up with it in a secure embrace and waits for the vessel to enter hyperdrive before he hands the child over. Corrin watches the content reunion for a second longer, knowing how near his failure to protect the youngling came to result in true horror, and suddenly he can't breathe. He turns away and quietly creates his way to the cargo area, taking off the stormtrooper visor and hurls it aside to clatter along the floor until it bumps against the wall. The child coos a reply and leans against the touch of that beautiful language again. The Mandalorian quickly runs his hands across its head and arms, checking for injuries. The two of them cautiously begins to undo and free Corrin from the stormtrooper armor. He ends up sitting there similar, a heap of collapsed armor, attempting to get air into his lungs, but his legs just buckles under. Corrin finds it hard to breathe anew, but this time for a very distinct reason. He can't see the Mandalorian's eyes, but he can sense his own lips part in an unspoken invitation. The child peeks across his shoulder with perked ears and creates a happy sound back at Valentis, and he can't help but to smile back at him. They land on the first inhabited planet they've landed on, the first being desolate enough. Corrin marvels at his good luck and has to admit he has small to no skills in star maps. You better start learning afterward. I'm not going to do all that navigating in the future. You got to do your part, the Mandalorian grumbles. I will learn, no problem. Why, yeah, no, I can do. That's no problem. He absently rubs his wrists where the touch still lingers. Good, Corrin says. The man grumbles. Good, the child is soon back where it is going to go to. Two Mandalorians walk out of a building, wearing blue armor and carrying an even more massive gun. Corrin is surprised to see how odd the bounty hunter is reacting to the sight of them. The big one shoves a vibro knife into Corrin's hand and takes the child from him and pivots to face the town again. The Mandalorian greets the one in gray armor, and the other is smaller, leaner, with gray and red mail and a regular blaster by their side. Paz looks at Corrin with a heavy sigh of disappointment. I was hoping you were dead. Corrin believes he hears a snort of a laugh from the Mandalorian. Whatever you do, don't back down, a voice booms. Corrin jumps a small, unaware that the Mandalorians had approached them and quickly hides the knife behind his rearward, doesn't want them to get the wrong idea. The big man is coming to a looming halt. Corrin's first instinct is to back complete, lower gaze, and avoid confrontation. Yet he remembers what the Mandalorian had informed him and forces himself to stand his ground. Paz reaches for the Beskar pauldron, reaching for the vibro knife in a tight reverse grip complete to the man's neck. The child coos happily, and Paz lets out a booming laugh and takes a step backwards to give Valentis his space and free himself from the threat of the weapon. The Mandalorian turns his head to appear at them and manages to glare across his helmet. He doesn't reply, merely glowers quietly. Allow us to buy you food, outsider. Paz bought Corrin a huge bowl of food, and including ordered a large glass decanter filled with wine. Corrin is too occupied focusing on the food to scan the mood nearby the table. He simply makes certain that the eager child gets a portion of the food too. The town is filled by farmers and traders, but as lengthy as they pay, everyone seems welcome within the restaurant in this sleepy little settlement. Paz takes great delight in tormenting his fellow Mando. Raga is an enabler. Valentis defends his position as King Oblivious. Chapter notes. Notice the end of the chapter 4. The three Mandalorians switch across to only speaking in Mandoa, while all trace of cheer is gone from their voices. They talk for a lengthy time, their tone serious, while the food and all the wine is gone. Corrin feels fine. It's merely that his legs doesn't appear toward B. Or, wait, he suspects it remains the floor. He can't quite focus on the silver visor, but he's fine. He's lucky. The Mando merely helps him along to their modest yet clean chamber. He had been quite insistent on there being 2 beds, yet at least they'll be sharing a chamber. Corrin isn't really used to sleeping alone. He doesn't similar the silence, is used to hearing either that squad or his platoon breathing, yet the Mandalorian is a more than a fine enough substitute, and the child is nearby. Corrin wakes up in the Mandalorian's room alone with a hangover and decides to work out. Paz and Raga find Corrin doing push-ups by a tree in the outskirts of the town. Corrin tries to pull his shirt over his head, but it gets stuck, and he tumbles hard into the man's chest. The hatch opens, and he hears Paz's voice. "You need toward—" There remains an amused chuckle. "Fine, we'll talk tomorrow." And the hatch closes again. The Mandalorian shrugs off, snorting a laugh into his chest as he tries to get the shirt free of him. And then Corrin is asleep, shifting against him, shifting one leg over his and hearing a hitch in his breathing for some reason. Corrin concludes that the very presence of this man, is dangerously addictive. He doesn't mind. Besides, it's not like they haven't shared a bed before. It doesn't. Corrin is training with Paz, Raga, and Paz in a tree. Paz is angry with Corrin and Raga when he sees the angry lines of the Mandalorian's body. Raga is sitting on the ground, one knee drew up and resting her arm on it. "You look hot. Maybe you should take that shirt away before you get a heat stroke," Raga observes. "We're here on a mission." Paz says, "You should have a better angle, or you could injure yourself." The Mandalorian then hands Corrin the child over to Paz with the child, which he accepts with relief and no compact amount of delight. He is about to apologize, though having no idea what, for the anger is not directed at him at all. He then sees the man standing a short distance away with the baby on his arm and realizes. Corrin watches a child draw a self-portrait of himself, a familiar figure in armor and a helmet. That 3 of them, together, they look like a family. The child makes a happy sound and puts the charcoal down before pointing at the drawing. Corrin can barely breathe when he reaches out and gently touches the picture. He looks at it for a deeply long time, can't take his eyes away it. But then the youngling demands his attention, and he very cautiously folds the paper and slips it into his pocket. The Mandalorian sits down on the bed and sighs as he explains to Corrin that Paz and Raga are here to retrieve something. "The area is flooded with mercenaries. We're going to find it," Corrin says. "The warriors have laid their battle plans for whatever they are up to. They're looking for it. They are going." Corrin and the Mandalorian are traveling with Paz and Raga in a jetpack. The sky is darkening and lightning is flashing in the horizon as they prepare for battle. The Mandalorian says, "It's going to be dangerous, and you may not get paid." Corrin shakes his face. "I didn't care. All he cares about is keeping the other man safe." The 2 are traveling by jetpacks, not dewbacks or speed bikes, but by the time they arrive, the sky is beginning to turn darkening. Paz asks, "Ready, ready, ready, ready," and I am now. Good luck is on our side. Only Paz and Raga have the jetpack, and they have to double up. They are crossing the ocean to reach the island where their target is. The security on the island must have detected they were becoming company, and everyone and their grandmother there appeared clearly armed to the teeth and eager to take them down. But bad luck decides to really turn complete the heat, and a blaster shot abruptly races towards them. Paz easily twists them aside from it, but more shots follow. Raga's jetpack has taken one serious hit, and she's struggling toward keep from spiraling out of control and not drop the Mando, who is now dangling dangerously across the sea and only held complete by her desperate grasp on his wrist. Neither of them were to fall into that sea, they would drown. Neither the Mandalore or Raga will be able to swim with the heavy. Corrin kicks himself away, breaking Paz's grip, and afterward automatically flails as he plunges towards the ocean. He hits the water difficult. It punches the air out of his lungs, drags him under and down, down, down. Attempting to swim is hopeless, but Valentis tries. He is desperate for air, shuddering beside adrenaline, yet the ocean and the weight of his mail is too much. Suddenly, he is slammed against something difficult, and his hands automatically latches on. A final rush of desperation surges through him, old. Corrin is surrounded by the furious ocean on all sides, the island a distance away, when he sees the lights of Paz's jetpack hovering nearby. He understands the man won't catch him if he calls out, so Valentis pulls his blaster and sets off a shot into the sky. When they land on the island, Raga and the Mando is waiting for them, surrounded by fallen bodies of the mercenaries who believed they'd be able to take on warriors. Paz lets Corrin find his balance, releases him, and pivots off his jet back. "You do not become to call us insane ever again." The Mandalorian, Corran's Mandalorian, stalks across, grabs a hold at the top of the breastplate, and Corran and Paz find the helmet in a chamber filled with all kinds of wealth and displays of power. On the wall, amidst all other trophies, is a beautiful Mando helmet made out of pure Beskar. Paz reaches out and carries it down, holds it for a few seconds before touching his forehead to it. He doesn't need them to take their helmets away to recognize what they were feeling: grief. They travel back to the town with the visor, gently wrapped up in a beautiful piece of cloth, likely worth as much as half one brick of Beskar. They travel in silence. Corran gets clean complete, sees he has gotten himself some fresh bruises to add to his collection, changes inside dry clothes and towels his hair dry while well. Only when there is zero risk of him ruining it seems he dig forward the drawing the child had made. The Mandalorian makes a growl and shoves Corran back against the wall. The bounty hunter's hand grazes by Corran's jawline and gently urges him to lean his forehead against his. They don't move for multiple heartbeats. Then the Mandalorian walks over to crawl complete on the bed furthest aside and slumps down there with a soft snore. Corran tells himself that the bounty hunter had merely been grieving his friend, seemed clearly quite drunk, and who hadn't done foolish things when they were drunk and missing somebody. Yeah, it probably didn't mean anything. It can't. Corran has never been that lucky. He doesn't fall asleep for a lengthy, long time telling himself it didn't happen to be that lucky because Corran hasn't been that fortunate. It didn't mean anything because it can't mean nothing. It doesn't mean what happened to him, it is just a fact. It's just that your life means further. It might sound sentimental, but to Corran knows it is just the fact that it doesn't. I'm still therefore shell-shocked at the amazing response this story has received and how numerous has found a place in their hearts for a mere OC. I've been stretched for time recently while haven't been able to keep complete with all the related works of this story, yet know that I appreciate every single one, and Corran has to replay the flashback multiple times in his head to make certain it really did happen. The Mandalorian creates another miserable sound, clearly as punished by the wine as Valentis had been. Gets complete on his feet, stands there for a bit, afterward hastily leaves the room. When they walk downstairs toward fine food, most of the other residents at the inn are nevertheless asleep. Corran sees the Mandalorian standing beyond the building with Paz and Raga. Paz hands Corran a small bundle of gifts and the child a cross on one arm and uses the other to accept her gift. He struggles to hold on to the youngling who seems set on being handed over to Paz, but then Paz is already complete in the air thanks to that jetpack and hovers above his reach. If only they knew. If they understood who he really was, he'd be dead. Corran can't even object when the youngling reaches up and pulls the fresh Beskar pauldron down to taste it. He panics and just about shoves the armor at the Mandalorian. The Mandalorian doesn't take it, merely moves his head. I don't need it, you keep it. Corran doesn't have a shadow of a doubt about his decision. Paz and Raga had been therefore kind to him, and it feels like he has tricked them. If they ever found out, that is all Valentis would ever be to them. That's that kind of luck he has. He hasn't had real friends since. Yet a stormtrooper was and is that enemy, and if they ever find out, it's the enemy. The Razor Crest is breaking out of the planet's atmosphere. Valentis is keenly aware of the value while the high praise that he remains currently wearing on that shoulders. Praise given without knowing the full truth, Corran discovers himself remembering every single word that seemed a clear innuendo that he had failed to catch. The Mandalorian mumbles and says, Siarika means beloved. Corran is utterly convinced that he heard wrong, but then he watches out at the planet they remain about to land on, and he forgets all about it. Following horrible desert planets and worlds covered with lush vegetation, they are eventually going to land in a planet covered with snow. They land near a middle-sized town, scarcely visible under the thick white cover. Corran exhales a smile and can't believe what he's seeing. Snow. The ship goes into hyperdrive and speeds off to land. It is then the Razor Crest shudders, waking the child up, and Corran unbuckles and moves over to pick up the fussing child up. The Razor Crest is. Corran is already pushing the button to open the cargo door. The temperature is near to freezing, and it doesn't take lengthy before Corran starts to struggle with his balance. He ends up falling, yet it is cushioned by the thick snow. The Mandalorian and the youngling remain on the ship, watching him, yet he's too occupied taking in the cold and the quiet to notice. He gestures for them to come upon out and join him in the snow. He shows the child how to make snow sculptures and compact snow caves, mostly carrying it in his limbs so it won't get too cold. Valentis also makes a compact snowball and throws it at the Mando, nevertheless hovering in the doorway, who easily dodges it while offers to shoot him with his pulse rifle in return. The child shuffles over to climb complete into his lap, settles, and they remain both savoring the heat from the fireplace of their fireplace. The room has the 2 beds the Mando demanded, but no crib can be discovered, which means the youngling has to share a bed with one of them. During the night, Corran wakes up as the child continues wandering rearward and forth between the beds near random intervals of sleep, sighing while grumbling, as if it can't quite settle in one location and is annoyed it has to travel the distance between them. They stay like that for a lengthy while, not really speaking much, merely savoring the quiet, and they slowly start relaxing against each other. It's bittersweet when it comes to an end, and the child releases him with a mumble about becoming them some food. But good luck not lasts forever. Corran is just grateful that he got this. It's not fine for his remembering his position in life, yet this is definitely good luck, at least. But good luck never. Corran's clothes are dry, but his shirt has gone missing. The Mandalorian is frozen in the middle from reassembling his blaster, and the sound seemed him dropping a piece of the armament into the small pile of parts on the table. Corran smiles and thanks the Mandalorian for their kindness. The bounty hunter then says they have to leave the Razor Crest after refueling the ship. 2 days later, Corran is carefully making his way through the cargo area. Suddenly, he spots movement and Valentis darts forward to climb complete the ladder. The hatch to the cockpit opens with a whoosh, and the youngling patters in as fast as it can on its small legs, wailing with excitement, merely managing to scuttle to safety behind the cockpit. The child is finally able to scuttle to safety. The Razor Crest is sliding through space, but Corran knows he'll only have one chance at success. Corran sees the Mandalorian glance across at him, and he places one protective hand on top of the child's face. Blowing out the air similar, a deflated balloon and lowering his own hands, Valentis scowls at the child. The Mandalorian shoves the child at Valentis and turns to the control panel. He doesn't know about Corran's past, which he's meant to loathe him, and Valentis just wishes to keep it that way. He doubts he could survive the youngling looking at him with anger and disgust, similar everyone does when they see a stormtrooper. A violent explosion shakes the Razor Crest difficult. Corran slams against the wall and the youngling cries out in distress. Red lights begin to blink, and multiple alarms starts to blare. The ship continues to... Corran is trying to control the ship when it crashes out of one of its engines. The Mandalorian is struggling to control it and turns it towards the planet they are currently hovering over. After sliding across a mud plain for quite some distance, the ship comes to a grinding halt next to one forest in the middle of nowhere. Corran follows the Mando into the forest, holding the youngling in one arm and carrying that assault rifle in the other. He can catch the Death Troopers shouting orders a compact distance aside, preparing to follow their prey. They make it longer than Valentis anticipated before the first blaster shot comes flying across their heads. But that is also when the chaos starts. Get the kid, gotta find cover, higher ground, so move it's moving it, Corran says. Go, the Mandalorian snaps. Corran slips down a hillside and slides down a muddy hillside. He takes down 2 Death Troopers, constantly listening for that sound of the Mandalorian's rifle, and remains reassured every time he hears the weapon being fired. When he rounds some bushes, Corran sees the therefore familiar stormtrooper and sees the person in it flinch rearward and raise their hands defensively, all screaming inexperience and fear. That is, when Valentis does the mistake of hesitating. Corran kicks the stormtrooper in the leg and then kicks them in the knee, and when they go down, he rolls across to grab his rifle and fires point blank. The stormtrooper is still alive then, but Corran doesn't stick nearby to check if the trooper is dead, merely hastens on. He doesn't want to check out if the trooper is dead. He looks up and sees flashes of blaster shots up on top of the hilltop, yet it does fling him to that ground and he loses his grip on his rifle. Corran hears the sound of the Mandalorian's rifle hit him in the center of his breastplate, knocking the deeply air out of his lungs and sends him flying backwards. He is lying on his back in the dirty grass, struggling to breathe, can't catch his breath. 2 Death Troopers emerge next to him and yank him up to stand on unsteady feet between them. Filion orders them to take him to the Imperial ship, which had not landed near the Razor Crest. For the first time, Valentis is relieved that he isn't considered a part of the family, since this means they will shortly be out of harm's way. He's glad for that one piece of fine luck in this mess of poor luck. Provided they are safe, that's all that matters. He is grateful. Valentis smiles and answers honestly, I don't know. Where the small one can live in peace with his father and eventually be a child without the ghost of the Empire looming over it. They come to a halt next to the open vessel, where a Death Trooper approaches them with the latest report. They lost sight from him and the asset, Corran says, secure in his abilities. No, you won't. Filion snarls furiously and waves at the two death troopers flanking Valentes. Get him on board the damn vessel. One of the troopers shoves Valentes into motion, and he reluctantly walks complete the ramp and into the ship's holding area. The vessel jerks a third time and appears toward be stuck midair some meters above the muddy surface. On the ground, the little youngling stands with its eyes shut in concentration and his little hand raised complete towards the ship, and next to it is the Mando, standing with his pulse rifle armed. Corran sees the initial crack appear in the window, fires a couple of shots further to be sure, afterward shoves Filion at the charging death troopers while runs forward. He places one foot upon the control panel, crosses his limbs protectively in front of his face, and afterward, Corran crashes through the window. Corran lands difficult on his feet. The muddy ground do soften the impact, a small, but it also throws him away balance, and he hears something snap within of him when he rolls. He is almost there when he sees the youngling fall over in the mud, and he realizes he needs to be come down there to protect them. The pilot dives to the sides, curling. Valentes drops to his knees mid-run, while comes to a sliding halt by the youngling, picking it up to study it. It creates a faint sound, eyes barely open, yet it also gives a faint smile, and Corran exhales his relief. Next to him, the Mandalorian fires his rifle once more, shoves another bullet into his rifle. In the background, Valentes sees the ship's cannon turn, and horror strikes once anew as he realizes what is about to happen, yet he can't become the warning out in time. That cannon fires, and the sound is deafening. The mud flies up before something slams into Corran, goes flying on his back as well. Shakes off the dizziness, quickly making sure the distressed child is okay, then sits complete and sees that it had been that Mandalorian's rifle which had struck him. He instantly scouts that surroundings and sees no sign of the man. He quickly takes aim at the ship, and Valentes drops the rifle to the ground, while uses his slightly lethargic right arm toward capture him in a fierce hug instead. The Mandalorian's legs give in while he flops down to sit on that ground with a surprised sound. Corran places the child in his arms and moves up to tenderly ease the edge of the cloak aside from the man's neck. Underneath the cloth is a mess of plasma and torn skin. The wound is deep, and the youngling is in no state to help. All Valentes can think about is that there remain medical supplies on board the Razor Crest. How many death troopers are out there? Do you know? Corran asks the Mandalorian. He leans down and pulls him back complete on his feet, ignoring his own pain, and pulls the man. Corran feels the guilt crushing him, therefore hard, it is physically painful. The hurt, the Mando dangerously so, because of him. Since they came back for him, why did you come rearward? You should have taken the baby while run, you had your chance. Corran despairs in thin, fragile voice. Because you belong with us. The words make Corran feel even worse. It's too much, too powerful. It's all he ever wanted and yet can never have. Because you belong to us, does he? Can he, or will it be taken aside from him too? Bad luck has not let him have anything near to this precious for very lengthy. While Corran knows he won't survive losing this, losing them. At least, he can do that. He can do what he does that. It doesn't kill them. He takes a couple of deep breaths, forcing his mind blank. We need to become off this planet before reinforcements arrive. He can't. Corran is no mechanic, yet another thing he not took any real interest in and left to such overpaid and overrated delivery boys while girls in the scout trooper squads. Luckily, the undamaged Imperial vessel had landed not too far aside, and taking out the two pilots is simple. Corran has more trouble becoming the parts they need, free, and hauling them rearward to the Razor Crest. Would it be easier to take the Imperial vessel? Probably, but he has no idea how to, including start it. It has tracking devices on it, and Valentes knows the Mandalorian is fond of his own vessel, so he will make it work. Luckily, it is merely the one engine, and he can notice which parts to replace with the examples he has brought from the other vessel. He gets to use a blowtorch anew. We don't need it perfect, the Mando had mumbled. We just need to get to limping, and we... Corran finds the Mandalorian unconscious and tries to wake him up. The child is in his left arm, and Corran hoists it in to the child's left arm. They are taken to a small house in the desert, with a woman standing there with a blaster aimed at them. The woman eventually lowers her weapon and allows them inside the house. In every corner, there are machine parts and semi-dismantled arms, and things Valentes has no idea what are. He warily hoists the youngling in his right arm and steps into the home of a Zeltron bounty hunter. Corran suspects that the ship's left leg is presently entirely busted, yet they are there and they are in one piece. The bounty hunter will pay for the parts of his ship, It is not the first time he has ever been to such a. Corrin is too surprised by her forwardness to actually speak. The woman hands him a wet cloth to wash away the burned area of his neck. Corrin places the youngling on a soft sofa in the living chamber next to the kitchen, surrounds the sleeping youngling with pillows to make certain it won't roll off it in its sleep. I found him more dead than living out in the desert once. Shot up real bad then, too. The woman makes a doubtful sound, crossing her limbs, considering, then sighs and walks across to find a bowl and some water. I'm fine. I just need my ship complete and running again, and we'll be out of your hair, Corrin says, trying not to stare as the Mando unfastens his cloak and lets it fall toward the floor. Is the child well? She asks. He's fine. He's just sleeping. Corrin is almost eager to become out of the chamber and be useful instead of doing or saying something stupid. The Mandalorian has dark hair then, the woman's voice says, and Valentis jumps back with a guilty look. She doesn't, including glance his way as her focus remains on covering the burn wound. I suggest you hurry. This one likely needs rest too. Corrin nods and walks out to the small circular building she mentioned. It takes Corrin near to 2 hours to clear out the mess, piling it cautiously against the outside wall of the main building. Yet he also has to battle layers of dust, sand, and matters he'd rather not think about before, including considering bringing the Mandalorian and the youngling there. The woman inspects his work twice across the 2 hours, brings him clean blankets, yet otherwise sticks near the sleeping child and leaves. The Mando sounds groggy yet amused when he answers, I think you may be right. Corrin changes the nevertheless sleeping child's muddy blanket for one clean one and lowers him into the crib to rest there. He can't appear at either of them without feeling the guilt. Corrin points towards the hatch and absently notes that his hand is still shaking. It's okay, you hear me. We're okay, the Mandalorian says, and continues to draw his fingers across Corrin's hair. A soft coo catches their attention, and Corrin sees the drowsy child standing complete in its crib and soon climbing across the edge. He means to get complete to help it, but the Mandalorian's arm is soon gone. Corrin doesn't need to rest as he feels fine, therefore he can just get started on repairing the Razor Crest, and he finds himself growing sleepy. It's either, the next morning, Corrin wakes up with the child sleeping and drooling on his core, and the Mandalorian snoring softly next to him. Corrin doesn't understand, isn't worthy of them, yet they want him here. They came rearward for him, they didn't leave him behind, they didn't merely replace that faceless drone, no. They came back, and they fought for him. The Mandalorian carries Corrin's hand, places it on the child's rearward, and holds his own over it. The small one makes a content coup and flicks its ears once earlier it's asleep again. The little one is climbing up on their bed. It makes absolutely no sense how this puts the most idiotic smile on Corrin's face, yet it does. He gently moves the child over to the child and gets out of bed. He quickly scrounges together a meal. The bounty hunter nods a greeting to Leida, which she returns. Afterward, he enters the kitchen and sits down on the other chair. Feeling better, Valentis asks, getting up and cleaning away the traces of the meal. The Mandalorian glances briefly at the youngling, who is chewing on something that likely was alive at one point, then pivots his attention back to Corrin. Put the kid down. Why? I'm fine. I've broken it twice earlier, and it didn't even slow down my training. The man answers, his voice strangely hoarse and his body deeply still. The skin is dark purple, there is further swelling than he likes, but it'll be fine. Corrin sighs and pulls away his shirt, accidentally dragging his undershirt beside it, and is in too much pain to separate it. Therefore, he just takes it all off and bares his entire torso. The Mandalorian's pulse would race as frantically as earlier if Valentis placed his mouth to the man's neck. We should face to the ship, Leida's voice says. Sure, yeah. Now, okay. Corrin scrambles to get fully dressed anew, ignoring the still burning pain in his shoulder. Moff Gideon shoots him and orders him to leave the medical bay of the cruiser. Gideon is gritting his teeth in raw fury as he marches back out of medical bay, gritting teeth in bare fury. Set course for Navarro. Let us demonstrate those Mandalorians what happens when you, fixed in Chapter 6, the muddy aftermath from nearly losing each other, such a tender and gorgeous moment. Notice the end of the chapter for more notes. The Mandalorian tries to make Corrin realize he isn't, except in all the perilous ways. Moff Gideon's plan has consequences. Moff Gideon is trying to get Corrin to help him out of the dangerous way he thinks he is a good Samaritan. He can't be blamed or carried responsible for whatever crazy ideas she conjures up on her own. I help out with the vessel and the kid too, you know. It's not like he's usually not this useless. until he suddenly realizes she thinks he and the Mandalorian are a couple. I guess that's why he resolved to keep you. Men are always weak for pretty things, Corran says. You're probably right about that's probably right. She pauses, crouched on. Leida smacks Corran over his fingers when he tries to lift up a box filled to the rim with parts. That Mandalorian is waiting for them as they approach the building. Leida pulls out a folded sheet of paper from her baggy pants. It's the child's drawing, the one he'd drawn for Corran. That child is sleeping in his right arm's embrace. It surprises Corran a little to sense a sting of sadness at that, but he has scant possessions of his own, and the believed of how the child had created it for him, had included him in the drawing, made it special to him. He hadn't meant to leave it similar, that, in the desert planet, in his own pocket, the dust sleigh is loaded, and soon they are. Corran notices. The pulse is fluttering beneath the golden skin, much like it had sensed against his lips when he'd pressed them against the man's wrist. Corran is startled at the sudden feeling of the hand taking a hold of Corran's left hip. He quickly recognizes the grip as an anchoring move instead. Let's get to work, the Mandalorian answers, and they all move across to the dust sleigh to start laboring on what needs to be done to become the Razor Crest rearward in shape. It's only that third son left when they decide toward quit for the day. Aside from several breaks to eat and drink, they have been laboring nonstop, and Corran suspects they will have the vessel functional again a lot faster than he believed. Leida might be weird, but she understands her stuff, and the Mando is quite the skilled mechanic, unlike Corran. He then, there is no other word for it, grabbed the child on the way out, ignoring. Corran's collarbone hurts, therefore he doesn't get much sleep that night. The Mandalorian is so distant out of his league, it's almost funny. He needs to stop. Why does he still want more? How can't he just be satisfied after being granted this? Why is he constantly brought rearward to the feeling of the man's wrist against his whips? This is ridiculous, and not an option. Shut it down, right now. Bad luck keeps punishing Corran. He's too greedy. He shouldn't let his standards slip. His aged sergeant had informed him how important it was to do matters right and to work through the pain. Later, Corran is in the middle of his fifth push-up, when the Mandalorian steps out of the building and halts in his tracks at the sight from him a couple of meters away. He had hoped to be finished. Corran is stunned when the Mandalorian asks him to stop his work if it hurts. The bounty hunter's hand comes up to cup the side of Corran's neck. Valentis shivers, has to force himself toward open his eyes, and swallows down whatever words remain threatening to spill out. The Mandalorian whispers out of the blue and pulls away and says, "We need to get back to work." Corran nods, but he doesn't understand why he's being punished and feels like he's been punished. Leida finishes her work on the engine, and it takes both her and the man, and some inventive engineering, to lift the vessel to fix the landing gear. It could almost feel as if it could feel like they're being punished. Back to work, Corran gets stuck either watching the youngling or doing light duties. It takes both. Corran is sent into the cockpit to push a single button to power up the Razor Crest. The Mandalorian insists on him taking it simples, as if he was actually suffering from a deadly injury. Red lights and sharp sounds are rarely a sign of anything fine. Corran quickly powers down the vessel, waits for every light to die out again. When it doesn't, he goes and discovers the Mandalorian. He does not expect the figure to bolt into action, running into the vessel and powering it back up again. They must be under attack. We can use the hyperdrive and explode. Not with the quick and simple repair we've done. I informed you earlier, you need to change a lot of these parts I don't have. Not the stuff I don't have. Corran shakes his head a little. So we. Corran and the child are staying on the ship, but he won't take no for an answer. The Mandalorian mutters about Corran's damaged breastplate, too broken to fix. The child is restless, clearly picking complete on the tension in the cockpit, and at one point it reaches a small hand up towards his broken collarbone. You need to take it easy too, kiddo, Corran says, taking a hold of the child's hand and lowering it. He just hopes fine luck is on their side, and they don't die earlier. They find a name for the child. It's not long before problems emerge when the Mando begins to push the engine, but little she can't patch together mid-flight in ways that Valentis has no hope of understanding. The Razor Crest once again carries to the sky and leaves. The Mandalorian slips the ship under the Star Destroyer's radar, and they are shortly flying dangerously low over the barren landscape of Navarro. For Corran, it's similar, seeing a ghoul from that past, knowing he'd know every corridor while they were all identically designed. He remembers that father, his uncle, in their shadowed officer uniforms, stalking down the hall and warning him he requires to do better, to remember that family's honor, and it gets a little hard to breathe. Approaching Navarro, they all sense a moment of horrified dread when they notice the Star Destroyer hovering near the planet. The city and a handful of scout troopers at its entrance are hidden in the distance. Corrin is kneeling next to the youngling, running gentle hands over its head and ears a final time, running his fingers along its drooping ears. Corrin and the stormtroopers sneak into the city, which is flooded with actual stormtroopers. The Mandalorian immediately activates his communication piece. The youngling patters eagerly towards them and grabs one hold of the Mandalorian's leg. "I thought it was asleep. I'm working on the engine." Corrin says in dazed amazement, "Well, either way, we're going to have to go nearby. A smug Valentes is proved right when it is no difficult task to sneak by the bored scout troopers, and shortly they are inside the city." They step inside, walk down some stairs, and soon into the dark. This is where the Mandalorians live. Corrin suddenly remembers he isn't wearing stormtrooper mail and helmet anymore. He walks deeper into the darkness. Corrin flinches violently at the sound of the armament being fired, but there is no added pain. After a couple of seconds, he discovers the stormtrooper lying on that ground with a steaming hole in the rearward of his backplate and a familiar sight upright a short distance away. Raga is leaning against wall, and a soaked bandage is wrapped around her waist. She is already dead. Her body merely hasn't quite caught up to it yet. The child coos and starts squirming. Therefore, he walks over and sets it down next to her side to talk in quiet Mandoa. He and his Mandalorian exchange looks earlier. They start undoing the bandage and revealing the wound to the youngling, who reaches out a compact hand and closes its eyes. There remains a faint light and the wound begins to close, and as soon as the skin. Corrin was asked to heal Raga following the strain it had been put across earlier, but there really wasn't much choice. The child is so small, so fragile despite its powers, Corrin still worries. He uses his numb hand to trail light fingers across the child's fuzzy face, making a silent promise to do better, toward not put it in such a situation again. The sound of voices from the inner room of the inner sanctum is heard by a group of Mandalorians. Paz and Raga are among them, but the last one is unfamiliar to Corrin, a woman with a spiked golden helmet and a short fur cloak. She asks, "This is the one who helped you against the..." The two captured Mandalorians are carried in a building to the northwest, and there are an entire bunch of stormtroopers guarding it. With a compact group, just the four of them, they will infiltrate, afterwards split complete, where one duo will be that distraction and the other will free the prisoners. Corrin's heart breaks when he has to hand the sleeping youngling over to the Mando, who will bring it to the final group of Mandalorians, fixed to evacuate the planet on a vessel via the route they had used coming in with the Razor Crest. The youngling can't come with them. It wouldn't be secure to leave it here alone, therefore there is no other real option. As he walks away with the youngling, Valentes hears him speaking softly in Mandoa, while wishes he could one day understand. The Mando reaches out and places his hand upon the pauldron on Corrin's left shoulder. "Be careful. Remember no getting shot in the chest." Corrin says, "I know how to make noise. It's that sneaking part I'm shit at." Paz replies, a grin in his voice. "You two can kiss further later. You taught him well, but we have a mission." "Focus, focus," Raga says as they leave the T-section at the end of that hallway where they will part ways, then light it up. "Give us 5 minutes, then lit it up. Shouldn't be a problem. Just, don't get shot at all." Paz says, remember, no getting hit at all. The thought is too embarrassing." Corrin hesitates, casts a final glance at where he can notice the Mandalorian and Paz disappear around a corner, then follows her. He didn't just kiss again? Corrin is amazed at the realization which he's considered a friend by the Mandalorian. The lack of having one shattered skull means he's not considered an enemy, therefore he is amazed. The two captive Mandalorians, both in blue mail, don't need much persuading once they remain free of their bindings to get complete and grab weapons from the fallen stormtroopers. Corrin doesn't allow himself to appear too closely at the fallen bodies as he moves by them and across to where Raga is kicking in the hatch. He tells himself it's either soldiers he doesn't know or several of the many jerks he understood and who deserves it. He can't think whatever other way, or it would be too much. He takes up position next to the hatch and makes certain there will be no nasty surprise for Raga while the others, when they emerge. Clearly, Corrin fires blindly at the compact group of stormtroopers. He backs complete as he does, but he doesn't turn nearby, keeping his sights on where the troopers dive into cover. Corrin understands he has to make one choice: stay or make a run for it. Earlier, his grip fails entirely. Throwing the grenade, firing his blaster further for the sound and having any hope of actually hitting something, he stays low, continues firing, and at a moment from incredible luck, The blaster shot, which actually hits him, manages to hit the Beskar pauldron and bounces away to burn into the wall instead. Corran. Raga's voice calls out for him. Come on, go. Valentis shouts back and he's relieved to hear them run away from where Raga and the Mandalorians run away. He's torn between what he should do and what he wishes to do, but remembers making a promise that they be together again. And if he stays here, that. Corran finds himself face to visor with a lone stormtrooper blocking his way. Startled, Valentis lifts his blaster, yet his grip fails due to his numb hand, and the armament just slips out of his grip and clatters to the floor. They say CT-113 is a traitor. They say it is necessary in order to rebuild the Empire, yet war is not as glorious as the recruiters and that teachers at the Academy paints it out to be. Valentis says, remembering too well the horror of his initial battles before he learned to not feel. There are things happening, matters we didn't sign complete to do. The young stormtrooper says as they walk. I'll take you to your friends. The trooper begins to fall, and he spins around to see Moff Gideon and a young stormtrooper fall. You can't stay here. He hears the sound of a blaster and a spray of blood hitting. Corran Valentis, a stormtrooper CT-113, is hiding in the shadows behind the Moff and the Death Troopers. He barely notices that his Mando and Paz emerge from the shadows. They make it in a sprint to the Razor Crest, with Valentis and the two former prisoners in the middle. The Razor Crest is already powered up and lingering for them. Paz has barely stepped within and joined them in the cargo hold. Earlier, the ship takes off and the hatch starts closing.